The Borley Rectory has claimed to be the most haunted house in England, but in recent years doubt has risen over such a claim. Such ghostly activity has been well documented over many years, and the rectory has been home to many residents, including one Harry Price, who is recognised to be England's most eminent physical investigator. The rectory was built by Reverend Henry D. E. Bull in 1863 and is located in the village of Borley, North Essex. Before the rectory had been built, around 1362, there stood a Benedictine monastery on the site. A monk from the monastery had fallen in love with a nun from the Burres convent, which is located 7 miles from the village of Borley. Church elders had found out about the couple's plan to elope, but were caught. For their wickedness and crime, the monk had been hanged. The monk's friend, who had also been involved in the plan to escape as the carriage driver, was beheaded, and the nun had been bricked up alive on the rectory site. Many years later, Reverend Bull was named rector of the Borley in 1862 and built the rectory to house himself and his family. The rectory was a big building consisting of 3 floors with 20 rooms. It strangely had also included a number of underground tunnels and vault rooms, the reason for which is still unknown. For a number of years there had been no paranormal activity. In fact, the activity was first reported to start in 1885 by the well-respected author and English schoolmaster Percy Shaw Jeffrey. He reported to see stones being thrown through the air and other activity by an unknown force when visiting the rectory. Most famously and frequently, many who visited the home were used to seeing an apparition of a nun, possibly the one who had been bricked up on the site many hundreds of years ago. The nun was most commonly seen on the front garden and was said to drift through with her head bent down in sorrow. The nun could easily be seen through the dining room window, which Henry Bull had eventually bricked up as it would always pose a distraction to the dinner guests. Several people had also suggested they observed a lady wearing a grey cloak and a gentleman with a sort of bald head dressed in a long black gown being seen on the front garden. Reverend Henry Bull died in the Blue Room of the rectory on May 7, 1892. Henry Bull's eldest son Harry had inherited the property and found the supposed haunting to be entertaining. The apparitions became even more frequent during this time. Harry had even built a summer room overlooking the front garden where he smoked cigars and had a clear view of the nun. At times, a phantom coach, presumably the same coach the nun and the monk were to escape in, had also pulled up to the house a number of times. Harry suffered the same fate of his father and died in the Blue Room and claimed to have had communications with the spirit just before his death. With the death of Henry, the rectory had become vacant for some time, but that didn't stop the apparitions. A local carpenter, Fred Cartwright, had told of seeing the nun on 4 separate occasions. In 1928, Reverend Eric Smith and his wife moved in, but it wasn't all too soon until they heard a number of disturbances throughout the rectory. The ring of disconnected bells, small pebbles being thrown out of thin air, and footsteps where no person was could all inexplicably be heard, with lights being turned on and off and keys vanishing. They sought help by contacting the Daily Mirror, and in return the paper had arranged for Harry Price to pay a visit to the rectory, to which he stayed there for a whole year. The hauntings, though, were all too much for the Smiths, and they moved out only after 2 years. The rectory's next residents would be Reverend Lynon Algernon Foster, his wife Marianne, and their adopted daughter. Between 1930 to 1935, the Fosters would experience a substantial amount of paranormal activity, far greater than any of the previous residents. One unexplained happening stands out the most and centers around Marianne. She had been targeted the most with malevolent attacks, including being thrown off the bed at night, slapped by invisible hands, dodging objects being thrown at her, and at one point being suffocated by her mattress. Strangest of all, one of the spirits attempted to communicate with messages on the wall and scrap paper. Most of the messages are illegible, but one almost certainly reads, "Marianne, please help get," and the other which possibly reads, "Please for help and prayers." Taking matters into his own hands, Reverend Foster had the rectory exorcised, which for a short time worked. Not for long though, as strange music could be heard from the Borley church. Communion wine would unaccountably turn into ink. Bells would continue to ring on their own accord, and their adopted daughter had been attacked violently by an inexplicable attack. Again, the unseen forces of the rectory drove out yet another family. Harry Price then returned in 1937 and rented the building himself for 1 year, but little to no activity was witnessed apart from objects being moved and the sound of footsteps. One instance saw a mysterious coat appear, but no sighting of any spirit. Some parts of the rectory were seen to be colder than others. One specific spot was outside the Blue Room. During a séance held on the 27th of March 1938, with the use of a planchette, a ghostly communicant from beyond had told of how the building would catch fire that night and the nun's body would be discovered amongst the ruins. No fire, though, had happened that night. The final resident was taken by one Captain Gregson, who was not estranged to the unexplainable activity. In fact, he had planned on capitalizing on its ghostly reputation with guided tours and sightseeing coach trips. However, while stocking some bookcases, an oil lamp had overturned, setting the rectory ablaze. Witnesses who watched the blaze account for ghosts being spotted at the window looking in. It seemed the first premonition from the ghostly communicant came true. The damage, though, was irreparable, and the site was eventually demolished in 1944. Before doing so, Life magazine was able to publish an article on its history. Whilst photographing the final demolition of the site, the photographer managed to capture a brick floating in the air. Though this could be any one of the spirits the rectory has claimed, many have suggested the brick had been thrown by a nearby workman and accidentally captured by the photographer. After the rubble was carried away and the bricks reused for the war effort, leaving just a bare hole in the ground, Price excavated the basement. The bones of a young woman had been found and were certified by a pathologist. They were thought to be the bones of the Phantom Nun. Quite clearly, the second part of the premonition came true. The bones had been buried in a nearby cemetery in Liston in the hopes that the woman would finally rest in peace. The site is now unrecognizable, with the bungalow being built on the front garden. With the involvement of Harry Price and those former residents looking in to capitalize on the ghostly activity, it's no surprise that many skeptics and researchers have attempted to debunk the supposed hauntings. Many fingers point to Harry Price, who, even though had been recognized as a physic researcher, he was also known to be an expert magician, a member of the British organisation the Magic Circle, and a known hoaxer. Price had also managed to use the rectory to publish not 1 but 3 books and achieve a great deal of notoriety from it. Marianne Foster believed that most of the occurrences that happened to her had been staged by both her husband and Price in order to gain further notoriety. In fact, Price had in return argued that Marianne had been involved in fabricating most of the incidents herself, as the events only seemed to occur in her presence. Price's discovery of the bones had also been questioned, as the 2 gardeners who carried out the digging of the site identified the only bone being recovered to be part of a pig's jawbone. So, do you believe in the hauntings to be true, or was this merely a chance to gain publicity and money? Please comment below, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and as always, good night and sweet dreams everybody.